November 22nd, 2007. To all of you, this was Thanksgiving Day in 2007. Most of you awoke to smells of roasting turkeys, pumpkin pies baking in the oven. That morning, I awoke at 7:30 a.m. to my doorbell ringing and my sister giving me the news that to this day echoes in my mind. Heather, Daddy died last night. So for me, this was the year without a Thanksgiving. But yet in the 35 years I had been on the earth, I had never been more grateful or more thankful than I was that day. So how is that possible? It's because I believe. But it's even stronger than that. I know without a doubt that that was the day that my daddy was called home to our Heavenly Father. Now, I could stand up here for way longer than 10 minutes, and I could talk all day about what a good man that my daddy was. To this day, he is still the best man that I ever knew in my entire life. He was a single father, and my sister and I are better people for his example. I can't tell you the countless number of times that I saw him give to those less fortunate, be there for his family and make sacrifices, or even receive a phone call in the middle of the night because he was somebody that could truly be counted on. This man, even when I was in 11th grade in high school, my friends took a trip to Europe. He sold his car to get the money for me to go. He knew that I would never get that opportunity again, and he didn't want me to miss out. So after I would leave, every time I would visit, after I would say I love you, he always said to me, watch where you're going, lock your doors. Every single time. And you never really want to think of a time that in your life where your parents aren't going to be on this earth any longer. So when my dad's emphysema progressed and his health started to decline, he went to go live with my sister and my brother-in-law. And at that time, my nephew was 1.5 years old. Every day after I would get off work, I would stop by their house and I would visit with my daddy, and I would help take care of my nephew to try to give my sister a break. So the night before Thanksgiving on 2007, I went over to their house like I did every day, except this day was different. Hospice had come in that day. They had told us that it was just a matter of time. But there's no way that we could have known that those were the few moments, the few precious moments that I had left with my daddy. I wonder what I would have said to him had I known now what hospice had told us afterwards were the signs. His chest was bowing out because oxygen had nowhere to go in his lungs any longer. His organs were shutting down, but obviously we couldn't see that. So I just chit-chatted with him. And that's probably human nature, not want to face the inevitable. And I asked him what he wanted to eat the next day for Thanksgiving dinner, and he said mashed potatoes and ham. But actually, I knew he had not eaten in days. He couldn't breathe whenever he would chew. So that night, my sister asked me if I would take my nephew, and if I would take him home with me. She wanted to be with my daddy in case he needed anything. So I cut my visit short, and I got my nephew home because, little ones go to bed early. And as I was shutting the door and saying goodbye to my daddy, I said, I never knew that would be the last time that I'd see him. And I said, bye, Daddy, I love you. He said, I love you too, honey. He said, watch where you're going. He didn't have the breath to say, lock your doors. So I cracked the door back and I said, I will, Daddy. I said, I love you. Now, I've said this many times in my life. If you look back on your life after something has happened, you can see undoubtedly that God had his guiding hand in anything that you've been through. So how can I clearly see that God was guiding that night? Because as I look back now, I know that my nephew's room was downstairs where my dad's bedroom was. It was at the bottom of a very steep set of stairs. Had my nephew been there, he would have been awakened by the ambulance, the coroner, all the flashing lights that come with it. So I know that God was asking me to take care of my nephew, and he sent him home with me that night. Now, when the coroner and the ambulance got there, the EMTs were unable to carry my dad up this steep flight of stairs to get to the entrance. So, strangely, a couple of days before Thanksgiving, my brother-in-law's best friend, who lived out of the country, called and said that he wanted to come and spend the holidays with us. I know now that God sent him there because he and my brother-in-law carried my daddy on that stretcher up those flight of stairs. And when I got home that night, I worried that I was not going to be able to sleep. And I thought, I'm going to be worried about my daddy. I have a 1.5-year-old wiggly child who, if you've slept with a 1.5-year-old, they take up the whole entire bed. And that night, I honestly have never slept more peaceful. And I remember distinctly thinking just how calm and how safe I felt. And I know now that was God wrapping his arms around us, because he knew that when we awoke, the heartbreaking news that was going to be waiting us. So, excuse me just a second. And when my sister showed up and she delivered the faithful news to me that morning, the minute that she finished her sentence, I have never felt such calmness come over me, because I knew that my daddy's journey was over. I knew he was where he needed to be, and he was no longer struggling. So that day there was no Thanksgiving dinner for us. We went to my dad's house. We sat out on his deck, and we talked about what a great man he was and how thankful that we were. Some people never have one dependable parent. We could not have asked for a better parent. So when it came time to write the words on my dad's headstone, my sister gave me the honor, and I've never been more proud of any words that I've ever written. So what I wrote was, our greatest gift from God, no greater man, no greater love. Psalm 116:15 says, blessed in the eyes of the Lord are the death of his saints. That Bible verse has always brought me comfort. And someone told me once that God takes his most special people on holidays. And I've always held on to that. How fitting that this man was taken on the one day that we are most thankful. I can't think of anything more fitting. So my advice to you, during the holidays, if you've lost a loved one, if you have an empty chair at the table this year, if you're struggling with addiction, whatever your needs may be, give it to God. Don't avoid your troubles, embrace them. Ask for his help, and I promise you, you will conquer them. There is always, always something to be thankful for. If you're interested in hearing any more stories about my daddy and the experiences that I've been through, or strangely enough, the last time that I saw my mother was on Christmas Eve of 2011. That was my birthday, my 40th birthday. She passed away 2 weeks later. If you'd like to hear more stories about that, please feel free to visit my blog at www.rightofpassion.com. In closing, I just want to say thank you all for coming tonight. Watch where you're going and lock your doors.